Imagine ruling the most powerful empire on Earth, only to watch it freeze to death before your very eyes. Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't just a military genius. He was a force of nature driven by an ambition that terrified the world. But how did a man capable of outsmarting every monarch in Europe make the catastrophic mistakes that destroyed him? To understand his fall, we have to go back. In the late 1700s, France was surrounded by enemies who wanted her crushed. But France's savior wouldn't be French at all. He was born Napoleon Bonaparte on the rugged Mediterranean island of Corsica. Though from minor nobility, his family was constantly struggling. But his father secured him a scholarship that changed everything. At just 9 years old, he was sent to a prestigious military academy in France. He was poor, spoke with a thick accent, and was bullied mercilessly. But young Napoleon fought back. During a massive schoolyard snowball fight, he took command, displaying a tactical brilliance that shocked his wealthy peers. Isolated from the other boys, he spent his nights devouring books on history, mathematics, and military strategy. His obsession paid off. At just 16, he graduated early, earning his sword as a commissioned artillery officer. Then, in 1789, the world turned upside down. The French Revolution tore down the monarchy and the strict social classes along with it. Under the old system, a Corsican could never rise to the top. Now, talent mattered more than royal blood. Napoleon was ready. His big break came in 1793. British warships had seized the vital French port city of Toulon. A young Captain Napoleon devised a daring plan: capture the heights above the harbor and blast the British fleet into the sea. The plan worked perfectly. The British fled in flames, and at just 24 years old, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general. 2 years later, a royalist mob of thousands marched on Paris, intent on violently overthrowing the fragile revolutionary government. Napoleon didn't hesitate. He loaded his cannons with grape shot and fired directly into the crowd, clearing the streets in minutes. Now a national hero, he attended a high society salon where he met Josephine de Beauharnais, a beautiful widow who stole his heart immediately. But war called. Given command of the starving, mutinous army of Italy, Napoleon gave them a speech that ignited their souls. He led from the front. At the Battle of Arcole, he personally grabbed the flag and charged across a heavily defended bridge through intense fire. Moving faster than anyone thought possible, he split the larger Austrian forces, destroying them piece by piece through sheer speed. Seeking further glory, he launched an expedition into Egypt to cut off British trade routes to India. At the Battle of the Pyramids, his disciplined infantry formed impenetrable squares, devastating the charging Mamluk cavalry. It wasn't just a military campaign. He brought scientists who discovered the Rosetta Stone, finally unlocking the secrets of ancient Egypt. But back in France, the government was collapsing. Napoleon quietly left his army in Egypt and returned to Paris to seize the moment. In November 1799, backed by his loyal soldiers, he burst into the government chambers and forcefully dissolved the ruling council. At just 30 years old, he declared himself first consul, essentially becoming the absolute dictator of France. To solidify his power, he launched a surprise attack on Austria by doing the impossible, marching an entire army, cannons and all, over the freezing Alps. The shocking victory at Marengo secured his political position and finally forced a temporary peace across Europe. During peace, he rewrote the nation's laws. The Napoleonic Code stripped away ancient privileges and laid the legal foundation of modern Europe. In 1804, his ambition reached its peak. In a stunning display of arrogance at Notre Dame, he took the crown from the Pope and crowned himself emperor. He then crowned Josephine as his empress. The poor Corsican boy was now the most powerful monarch in the world, but the kings of Europe were terrified. Britain, Russia, and Austria formed an alliance, determined to wipe Napoleon off the map. In response, Napoleon unleashed the Grande Armée. It was a perfectly organized military machine that marched at a terrifying speed. In 1805 at Austerlitz, he faced a massive Russian and Austrian army. To win, he laid a brilliant trap, deliberately weakening his own right flank. As the enemy attacked his weak side, the morning fog lifted. Napoleon sent his hidden reserves charging up the center, slicing the enemy army in two. The retreat turned into a slaughter as French cannons shattered the frozen lakes, drowning thousands of fleeing troops in the icy water. Austerlitz remains his masterpiece. He had crushed two empires in a single afternoon, proving himself the greatest general alive. He forced the Russian Tsar to sign a peace treaty on a floating raft in the middle of a river, effectively dividing Europe between them. By 1810, the French Empire spanned the continent. Napoleon ruled over 70 million people, but his hunger for control was insatiable. Unable to invade Britain by sea, he tried to starve them financially, forbidding any European nation from trading with the British. When Spain resisted, he invaded, sparking a brutal guerrilla war that bled his armies dry for years. Desperate for a royal heir that Josephine couldn't provide, he heartbreakingly divorced her to marry an Austrian princess. But the fatal blow came in 1812, when Russia began trading with Britain again, and enraged Napoleon launched the largest invasion in human history. Over 600,000 men marched into Russia, but the Russians refused to fight, retreating deeper while burning their own towns and food. They finally clashed at Borodino. It was an apocalyptic slaughter. The French won, but the cost in human lives was staggering. Napoleon marched into Moscow expecting a surrender. Instead, he found an empty, silent city. That night, Russian saboteurs set Moscow ablaze. Napoleon watched in horror as the city burned to the ground around him. Stubborn and proud, he waited 5 weeks for a peace treaty that never came, delaying his retreat until it was too late. Then, the brutal Russian winter struck. Temperatures plummeted to 30 below zero. His invincible army began to freeze and starve to death on the march. In a desperate river crossing, engineers sacrificed their lives in freezing water to build bridges, saving what little was left of the army. Less than 100,000 men returned. Smelling blood, every major power in Europe united for a final massive assault on France. Outnumbered and surrounded, Napoleon fought brilliantly, but he was ultimately overwhelmed at the Battle of Leipzig. In 1814, enemies captured Paris. Napoleon's own marshals forced him to sign an unconditional abdication, stripping away his empire. He was exiled to the tiny island of Elba, but a man who conquered the world was never going to retire quietly on a rock. Less than a year later, he escaped. When an army was sent to arrest him, he opened his coat and dared them to shoot. They joined him instead. He raised a new army, leading to the ultimate showdown in 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. It was a muddy, bloody disaster. For the first time, his elite imperial guard broke and ran. Napoleon's reign was finally over. This time, the British took no chances. They exiled him to St. Helena, a desolate volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic, where he died 6 years later. Napoleon Bonaparte changed the world forever. But did his unstoppable ambition make him history's greatest hero, or its ultimate tragic villain? Tell us what you think below.